Yeah, so thank you for that wonderful presentation. This
Yeah.
mic feels hella loud. Am I crazy? It's good? Okay, cool. Thank you. That was very quick and succinct. Um, you talked about how there's EigenLayer and it's building all this amazing stuff, but one of the things that Adam said earlier is that there are staking protocols launching on Bitcoin. There's restaking on Solana, and I'm sure in other ecosystems as well, people are thinking about it. How should an AVS developer think about which restaking platform to build on?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we've seen in layer ones around blockchain, you kind of, there's reasons that you want different ecosystems. If you are building dApps that are in the blockchain ecosystem, then there may very well be the desire that your security is tied to that chain that you're settling on. Same thing in Solana. But EigenLayer's play is in the Ethereum space. We like Ethereum a lot. We think that the EVM, the DeFi ecosystem, the identity ecosystem, the layer 2 rollups, there's a lot of momentum and a lot of developers that are very familiar with that dApp ecosystem. It really is, in my opinion, the gold standard. Ethereum has that right balance of store value. It has enough compute, but it doesn't go crazy on that side. Like, it's nice to have more compute, but if you give up your decentralization, like some other protocols do in order to get tens of thousands of transactions per second, that's nice, but now you actually have a problem that your layer 1 is not your decentralized anchor that you want. So Ethereum gives you this layer 1, which is maximally decentralized. It can be run by Raspberry Pis, and yet you can get to tens of thousands of transactions per second, increasingly across shared sequencers and a set of rollups. So that right basis is what we're building on, and then we're betting fully on the Ethereum security as being a really solid basis. I should also say that when you're building SaaS protocols, there will be the need inside of SaaS protocols to have tokens for the protocols as well. And so all of those tokens in the Ethereum ecosystem come in as ERC20s. They peg back to Ethereum. And so when I am talking about the security, it's a mix of dual token of Ethereum plus the native tokens that are inside of protocols.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's quite interesting. When talking to different AVSs and different restaking teams, where some people say like, "Hey, I'm launching restaking over here, but I can also service, like let's say that I'm on Solana, but I can also service Ethereum applications. I can also service whatever applications." And it sounds like from what you said that you guys are focused on Ethereum builders and the Ethereum ecosystem. And so there's like a little bit of this expectation that, your primary users are going to be from the Ethereum ecosystem, even though technically they can be, anywhere and still use the Ethereum validator set.
Yep.
And so that gets into the next question, which is, are there any common characteristics or trends that are emerging between AVSs building on EigenLayer? And one in particular that stood out to me, as you were talking about Ethereum and the alignment with Ethereum, is such as dual token staking for protocols that would like to have potentially their own validator set, their own consensus, but because they're providing an Ethereum centered service, they would also like to have the dual token staking with the Ethereum validator set. So curious if you can talk about any of the trends or commonalities that you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that we've been seeing like a number of protocols that are looking to kind of bring new innovation to the field. And they don't want to have a very high bootstrapping cost where they have to actually figure out a way that they get their own token to billions of dollars of value. That's a very big kind of network effect around existing protocols. And so I'd say a good theme is, very open innovation where it is a little bit of, I would say, like an open field of possibilities for people. If you have an idea now, it's the barrier for entry it's much lower than before. I think all of this technology is coming at a really seminal transition point in technology, which is the transition from conventional Web 2 to AI-based Web 3. And in that transition, we really need to have private and sovereign assets around people's data, people's reputation, people's identity. So one of the biggest themes that I'm very excited about, and we're having a lot of protocols build on, is around this idea of building a verified cloud of AI services that is not owned by the OpenAIs of the world, but that actually becomes like a uniform data lake in Web3 around Ethereum.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
that actually gets directly into the next question, which you've seen them before, so maybe you tie
No,
that in.
I forgot them by now, but yeah.
But you talked about the Web 2 cloud platforms on some of your slides and how they were offering their own products and services. And it kind of ties back to, EigenLayer has EigenDA, as you talked about, and it couldn't help building it, but I'm curious about what other AVSs are you folks thinking about building? And what are the implications of you guys potentially building AVSs on the other AVSs that are building, within the EigenLayer ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 points. One is that if we do build any AVS, it's a very limited thing. We'd rather, build fewer things and just kind of settle the base platform. But we recognize for network effects, the likelihood somebody else would have come up and built such a powerful, well-designed DA system is very low. You could see on the chart a number of DA systems, and we really went to the limit, information theoretic type limits of how efficiently you could take node bandwidth in your validators and translate it into network bandwidth. So there'll be some cases where there's something where the technology lift is really high. It also may be a lot more of a public goods, like, DA data availability should be largely free. I mean, the base platform, if you look at it, is about security, and you want a whole bunch of things that are more like public goods. Certification, there's probably not a huge amount of money that somebody should be trying to make out of that. And so if somebody as a third-party vendor was building it, it would become potentially extractive. Because they would be trying to make money off a service that is not really venture investable in others. So when it's something that is just like a common platform, we'd like to drive the cost of it as low as possible, then it makes sense for us to put it in there. We're not adding things in order to extract more from the space. We're actually contributing them so that the space becomes more effective and also more cost efficient for AVSs and end dApps and users.
Yeah, and I do think that's a really great point because, especially for teams that are raising venture funding, there is that drive of you can't just build this thing that is meant to not make a lot of revenue but provide a lot of value. It has to kind of be able to do both, and so it makes sense for the EigenLayer team to focus on those services.
Yep.
And so you mentioned a couple of different examples of AVS that you liked, or like the verifiable compute and so on. What's the most clever AVS design that you've seen, and what do you like about it?
So it's hard to pick favorites because there's a lot of really amazing ideas coming up. I personally care a lot about AI, so that's why I highlighted it before, and I might have gone into that, but since I've already talked about that in the Q&A, I might bring up one other one just because it's an example of what happens if you can get the cost of fully collateralized security. Collateralized in the sense of somebody will lose as much money as they're trying to take from you by violating the service agreement that you had with them in the service. And I'll just point out, I don't know if how many people have ever heard about payment channels before? Just show of hands. Okay. So on the payment channel side, one of the biggest challenges has always been that you have to collateralize channels. And it's very cost inefficient to have, at scale, if you're running Visa-type systems and you're running tens of billions of dollars through, as Adam was pointing out, you would basically get crippled by how expensive it is to have all of this capital sitting in these payment channels in order to make this system trustless. But with restake security now, there's an opportunity, and some people are looking at that, of using restake security instead, bringing the efficiency of that security down to a much, much more efficient point. And we might actually be able to see those types of things reemerging on the Ethereum side. Maybe we'll have our own Lightning network in Ethereum.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Coinbase recently added support for the Lightning network, and that's something that I helped lead. But you see these problems within payment channels for a long time, but in Lightning network today, it's like small payments are able to go through successfully at like a really high transaction success rate. But as you continue to scale that up and you say, hey, I want to do this in an enterprise way, I want to do this in a B2B way, I want to be able to transfer, tens of millions of dollars, very, very quickly between venues or between, self-custody and a trading venue, it just becomes insanely prohibitively expensive for any kind of activity on that kind of scale. And so it's interesting now seeing the ecosystems converge more between like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, so that people aren't building just in their own separate tracks, but the learnings that we're seeing here and the products we're seeing here on EigenLayer can also be potentially applied to the innovation happening in Bitcoin, whether it's like with Babylon, whether it's with Light Network and so on.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a really good point there. That example of scaling up and down in that kind of a system is really well suited to this idea of elastic security. So you could bring down the not just the cost, but you could improve the performance quite a bit in systems that have kind of bursty needs for security.
Yeah. Okay. That was it for the prepared questions. And so I'd love to open it up to the audience and see if anybody has any burning questions they'd like to ask. Adam?
So, Robert, as I mentioned, we're making a big push to get people to fill out our survey, but there's still, so until that happens, we have some questions that maybe you can answer about what you're seeing from people. Like, what are you seeing AVS's expectations in terms of what they're going to pay out to restakers? Like, how wide a range is it? What differences do you see in the protocols that give you certain ideas about that? If someone says 1%, what kind of protocol is it? If they say 50%, what kind of protocol? What details can you share about what you're seeing, given how close you are to these builders?
It's a good question. It's a fair question. I should say from the Eigen Foundation side, we're very much probably looking at how to develop the protocol, how to make it more powerful, and then to let the market and the price discovery happen. So it's not a part that I personally focus on a whole bunch, which is probably a fair point. I think we need to separate out also early state and then end state, and I think in some sense, like when you look at it from a price discovery standpoint over a longer term, there's a supply side of staking capital that comes into a market, and how much is needed in order to get to a certain level. And it is very motivational to have percentages that are tens of percent or 100% or others. From a clearing settlement point on supply demand, if the amount needed for people who are looking for yield is a much lower number, then the staking would come in at that point. And on the demand side, people need a certain level of security, and there'll be a settling price for how they're sharing it across the AVS ecosystem. It's going to be a very dynamic market. It's a market that's never existed before, because right now, the shared security of Web 2 is trusting Amazon. It's trusting Azure as the person who kind of is the centralized financial backbone, and also the person that you trust for the SLAs around your storage and compute and others. Why don't people worry about, oh, my servers are going to go offline? They're just like, well, Amazon is very motivated to do that. In crypto, as you know, with things like Filecoin and others, it's based on protocols and how much money effectively people lose by not keeping storage online, by not doing computations correctly, and all of those things. So, I think there can definitely be impressions that people have. In general, I would say people who are building protocols, if you're paying out on that side, you want things to be as low cost as possible, and so you're going to be looking for that. If you're on the restaker side, you're looking for as high yield as possible. And the goal of something like EigenLayer is to create just an open marketplace where the pricing dynamics of capitalism allow the two sides to meet and find an efficient point, whatever it may be. So it's not exactly, can't crystal ball what it's going to be, but I can say that the market should be quite vibrant, active, and, in a sense, the most efficient markets are ones where there's a tremendous amount of information symmetry among all players. And so having a very open blockchain-based settlement market for security and for services it's a really good step forward in the ability to build computer software in clouds.
And with that, one last question.
Robert, a question for you. What are the current existential crises faced by shared security, and how do we minimize them moving forward?
I mean, I think we've had this for a period of time in DeFi, which is that you can end up with kind of stacking risk on risk. And there's a subtle thing here. In centralized systems, there's information asymmetry simply because when you trust the central actor that the balances are sitting in a bank somewhere, or let's even just say you trust the bank has your money, but fractionally it has 1% of the money and the other 99% is loaned out. These types of things cause fundamental information asymmetry where you think you have a no-risk, capital investment of a few percent, and in reality you could lose 100% of your capital in many scenarios. In DeFi, in theory, it shouldn't be the case. If somebody's building liquid staking or liquid restaking or any kind of these stack protocols, looping DeFi protocols and so on, all of it's on chain. You can see it. But I think one of the risks is, you would like the system to have more self-policing, that people are looking at and being very clear about what is the reward to risk ratio. Because it's nice if somebody, somehow figures out a complex DeFi construction that gets you from 3% Ethereum yield to 12% yield on Curve. The problem is that 4x yield may actually cause so much additional risk in your protocol that it's not worth it. But a lot of people can end up, especially if they're retail investors, just kind of looking at the top line yield. And so I think we need to have a maturity in the space where, and we have firms out there that are very active in the space, that are looking at the financial risk, and that we have much better analysis and proper risk reward. I think one of the other interesting points is in our field, there's been a lot of time, and we should always have this, where individuals are fully empowered to do whatever retail investing they want. But we are getting effectively now a lot of kind of open, permissionless, hedge fund style type things in crypto. I shouldn't call them hedge funds. What I would say is basically people who are able to figure out the risk reward ratios properly, and it's sort of like the institutional players moving in. And so I'm not sure if that's where ETFs are going to go and others, but there's definitely a lot of people in the financial space who know how to, and it's their job to figure out these types of ratios. And hopefully we'll start seeing a more sane aspect, because your question is like fundamental risks. This isn't actually an EigenLayer one. This is just fundamentally a crypto DeFi one, that if you stack up risks and think that you're getting to a better place, you may really not be, because you may have a DeFi contagion that could be, quite risky as well.
Cool. Well, with that, thank you everyone so very much, and thank you, Robert, for coming up.
All right. Thank you all. All right.
Nicely done.
Yeah. Thank you.